Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.
Today is Friday, August 1st, 2025, coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network, a special edition, 2 fantastic book interviews you do not want to miss. First up, the nation's justice correspondent, Elie Mystal, talks about his new book, Bad Law, 10 Popular Laws That Are Ruining America. It examines how our country's laws on immigration, abortion, and voting rights don't reflect the will of most Americans. He offers a perspective of how we'd be better off abolishing them and starting over. Also, on today's show, did you know the first paramedics in America were black? Yeah, I didn't know that either until I saw a scene from HBO's TV series The Pit, which includes references to the Freedom House Enterprises ambulance service, which was considered the first professional paramedic service in the United States. Folks, it's a fantastic book that breaks down this. Author Kevin Hazard wrote American Sirens. Trust me, you don't want to miss that as well. It is time to get our read on. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
Folks, we got many laws in this country, but it doesn't mean that they can't be changed. Well, Elie Mystal, you've seen him many times in our show. He's the justice correspondent for The Nation. He has a new book called Bad Law, 10 Popular Laws That Are Ruining America. It's a book that you definitely want to check out. And Elie breaks down to me why these laws should be changed and saying, listen, most Americans don't even agree with these laws. And in his latest literary work, he lays out his thoughts on how Trump is blatantly disrespecting the law and so many other issues that we break down. Here's our conversation. All right, Elie, before we get into bad law, explain to people that we literally are facing a significant constitutional crisis because of the twice impeached, criminally convicted thug, con man in chief, Donald Trump.
Yeah, so the way that I've tried to get people to understand the problem here, right, is this. The president does something. Whatever president, whoever president, the president does something. Now, what's supposed to stop the president from doing those things, right? Well, we have a couple of options, right? We have laws that are passed by Congress. We have court orders that are issued by the judicial power, usually the Supreme Court. If the president can ignore both of those, right? If he doesn't have to follow the law as written down by Congress, and he doesn't have to follow a court order as issued by a federal court, then we don't have anything approaching a democratic self-government. We have a fascist dictatorship where the whims of the ruler affect what kind of a situation we live in, right? And that's exactly what Trump is doing now. One great way to understand it is with all of his illegal, unconstitutional funding freezes, right? He's cutting off money to various organizations, any organization that basically hires and admits Black people, their money is under threat, right? And that money that Trump is taking away was authorized by Congress, right? It wasn't authorized by the president. It was authorized by an act of Congress. He has been told by the Supreme Court and various lower courts to put them to give the money back, to turn the money back on. But he doesn't. He just keeps not paying people, right? So what do you call that, right? If the president can stop money from going to places that are off, that Congress has already authorized, that the court has already told him that he has to fund, but he can just not do it, that's called a constitutional crisis. That's a situation where the rule of law has broken down, and now we're at the whims of a warlord, which is what Trump thinks of him. It's just how Trump thinks of himself.
And for people who don't understand, there's an enforcement mechanism in the court, and it's called the Department of Justice.
Yeah, the Department of Justice doesn't really function anymore, right? Because the Department of Justice has been completely captured by the MAGA movement. Pam Bondi is not an independent United States Attorney General. She is a sycophantic United States Attorney General. She just does what Trump tells her to do. And so there's going to be no federal law enforcement forcing Trump to do any of the things that he doesn't want to do. And I keep talking about Trump, but I also want people to understand this isn't just about Trump. This is also about the co-president, Elon Musk, right? Because for all of the court orders that are aimed at restricting or restraining Trump's action, there are also a ton that are aimed at restricting or restraining Elon Musk's actions through Doge, right? But again, who's supposed to enforce that? Who's going to force Elon Musk to follow a court order? Well, that would have to be the executive branch, the President of the United States, the Department of Justice, and the FBI. And all of those organizations are so afraid of Musk that they won't say boo to him. So not only does Trump get to operate above the law because he simply ignores court orders against him, but Musk gets to operate above the law because Trump won't enforce any court orders against his daddy. And that's the vice grip that these people have our country in right now. This is without being hyperbolic, this is how democracies die. This is how you go from a Republican government based on democratic self-interest and universal suffrage to a dictatorship.
And what's laughable is that the person who made all of this possible is John Roberts, by the Supreme Court allowing Trump to win by saying, you have immunity. You can do whatever you want. He took that ruling and said, oh, if I get back in, I don't give a damn what anybody has to say because I'm the king.
The best thing that you can say about John Roberts, if you're trying to be completely generous to him, is that he is Dr. Frankenstein, right? In the Mary Shelley novel of the same name, that he created a monster. And now he's kind of running around being like, oh my God, what to do about the monster? It's killing my cousins. Like, that's the best way of thinking about Roberts. But I think that is far too generous. Dr. Frankenstein feels bad about the monster that he created. I don't think John Roberts feels bad. I don't think John Roberts is particularly afraid of the monster. I think John Roberts likes it. I think John Roberts likes the monster that he created is now going around and snuffing out the rights of people that John Roberts himself has never liked and never thought should have rights in the first place. So I think they're acting more in coordination than at opposition. There are processes. There's a way that Trump is doing it that I suspect John Roberts isn't thrilled about. but the outcome, the final actions that Trump is taking, the policies that he is implementing by fiat, I think these are policies that John Roberts generally agrees with, and that is why he created Trump in the first place.
And see, this is the thing that for me, I keep saying to any Democrat in the future. First off, if I'm running for president and I'm a Democrat, I'm going to say, the press is going to say, Governor so-and-so, Senator so-and-so, Congressman so-and-so, Congresswoman so-and-so, are you going to release your test scores, your transcripts? No. Are you going to release your health records? No. Are you going to are you going to put your money in the blind trust? Hell no. And then if they win, I'm going to use every inch of power of the presidency. See, Ellie, this is the thing that I believe happened. Democrats want to uphold the virtuous institution. Republicans are about power.
Republicans use power maximally whenever they get a chance, and Democrats don't. And Roland, that actually kind of brings me back into my book and to why I wrote it, right? Because when Republicans get into office, they come in with a plan, and that plan is to smash things. They want to smash people's rights. They want to smash people's abilities to resist them. They want to create a system where Republicans can never be uncreated, can never be kicked out of office again. They come in with a sledgehammer and they take it to government institutions, right? When Democrats come into office, they come into office with super glue and duct tape, and they try to reconstitute things that the Republicans have smashed before without their own sledgehammer, without their own plan or strategy to smash the things that the Republicans have created, the often evil, racist, misogynist things that Republicans have created. The Democrats don't come in with a sledgehammer. They come in with, again, a roll of duct tape, trying to protect institutions as opposed to smashing the evil institutions that Republicans erected, right? And one of the reasons why I wrote the book is that, as I've been saying, Roland, this is my attempt to start writing Project 2029, right? Republicans came in, Project 2025, with a plan. They are implementing that plan. It is terrible for our people, right? Well, what's the Democrats' plan to counteract that, right? All you've got is like, we're not going to do what the Republicans do. We're not like that. That people don't come out to vote because they're like, oh, Orange Man is very bad. They already know the Orange Man is very bad. They've baked that into the system. Democrats need an actual plan for what they're going to do, and I argue what they're gonna smash if they ever get the opportunity to hold a sledgehammer again. And my book is about 10 things the Democrats could smash if they ever get power again in 2029.
So here's a perfect example. So Trump comes in, he overturns the Lyndon Baines Johnson executive order as it relates to segregation in federal jobs. Democrats, oh my God, the Dobbs decision, they overturned Roe v. Wade. That's because Democrats actually were, it's stare decisis. Oh no, it's already been decided. Republicans were saying, no. We get to court, we overturn this sucker. Democrats did not use the power of legislation to codify, to make it law. They just said, the courts, they're never going to touch that again. This right-wing court is like, oh, hell no. We're going to go back and tear down everything. Them accepting the 14th Amendment deal. They are literally saying we're going to exercise power. What you're laying out is, Democrats, if you get power again, damn it, use it.
Use it, right? Use it. And it's not, you were talking about the lack of legislative protections for abortion rights under previous Democratic administrations. But you and I have talked about all of the executive actions Biden could have taken even after the Dobbs decision to make sure that abortions were still available and safe and effective in the red states that were banning abortion, right? There was immense federal power that Biden could have used, could have brought to bear to make sure that you could still get an abortion in Texas, because Texas's laws, for instance, banning abortions don't apply to military bases. That's federal law. They don't apply to native reservations. That's federal law. But the Biden administration could have made abortions available on every military base in Texas, regardless of what Greg Abbott and Jonathan Mitchell would have said, and there would have been nothing that Texas could have done about it, because that's a vector of federal power that happens to exist in the state of Texas, right? But Democrats don't play that game. Democrats don't use the power maximally.
Actually, look, here's the line that I use, Ellie. Republicans go, what line? Ain't no line. Democrats see the line from 500 yards away, and they go, "Oh, we can't get near the line. You're 500 yards away. You're not even up close." And that's that to me. What is maddening? The purpose of winning is to exercise power.
It's something that Republicans have always understood. It's why the Republicans have been able to take over the Supreme Court. It's why the Republicans have been. I mean, even if you look right now, there are people who voted for Trump, who don't really like what he's doing. I mean, nobody likes paying $7 for a dozen eggs, and nobody likes the tariffs, and nobody likes not being able to get their hands on the Switch 2. They don't like what Trump is doing, but they still give him credit for doing it. They still say that, well, he's trying to keep his promises. He said he was going to do this, and now he's using all of his power to do what he's promised to do, right? Democrats never get the benefit of that, because Democrats are never seen to be using their power as fully as they could. Democrats are I remember in the Biden administration, we had to have entire discussions. I had to write entire articles about the Senate parliamentarian and that functionary in terms of whether or not Biden could get his budget and his agenda passed. Has anybody said
Democrats went?
Has anybody talked about the Senate parliamentarian in the first 100 days?
Actually, they did. You know what they said? We're not going to follow. We're not going to follow him. Democrats actually said, "Well, the Senate parliamentarian has ruled, so therefore we can't do that." Republicans went, "We're going to ignore him."
Yep,
and they did.
And they just kept on stepping, right? So, like, it's one of the reasons why Democrats are always fighting an asymmetrical war, right? Because Trump, and people need to understand this, the most popular part of Trump is the bigotry and the misogyny, right? That's very clear. I don't think that I have to tell your viewers and listeners that. I think most of the people who are watching your show know that, right? But his second most popular thing is his attack on institutions. People feel rightly that the institutions haven't worked for them, haven't helped them get ahead, have held them back.
And that actually appeals to Democrats.
That appeals to Democrats.
That's the Bernie Sanders crowd.
That appeals to Democrats. That appeals to Black folks. That appeals, like when we go into our communities, those are the kinds of things that we hear, that the institutions haven't worked thus far. Why should we be voting for the party that defends institutions? That's a really good argument that even I have trouble defeating when I'm out on the street, right? Because I also don't like institutions. And I hate how Democrats always seem to defend them. Trump's second most popular aspect of his racist, misogynist personality is the idea that he is an anti-institutionalist and he is going to smash the things that get in people's way. The Democrats' counterpoint can't be, no, we're going to protect the things that get in people's way. We're going to protect these esoteric, elitist, ossified institutions that haven't actually lived up to their form or function. That's always the Democrats' point, and that is a losing argument. And so when you bring up people like Bernie Sanders or AOC or Ayanna Pressley or Jasmine Crockett, one of the reasons why they're popular is because they are also anti-institutionalists. They are also unwilling to let traditions and conservatism with a small c, the idea that things in the past were better, they're not willing to fall for the okadoke. And they're willing to smash the institutions that get in the way of our progress just as much as Trump is. And that's one of the reasons why they're popular. That's one of the reasons why you have people who vote for AOC and Donald Trump in the same election, right? From 30,000 feet politics, that makes no sense. They're on two opposite sides of the spectrum. But when you think about their anti-institutional base, that is how you get AOC and Trump voters, right? And it's a problem the Democrats haven't faced directly. And it's one of the huge reasons why they are bleeding people of color, right? And I don't like to do the white media thing. I don't like to suggest that Trump is winning Black people or winning Latinos. He's still incredibly underwater. Trump, if we walked around unprotected in Harlem, he would get his ass kicked. You know, this is not a close thing. But for Republicans, when they don't need to win the African-American vote, they just need to not get blown off the screen, right? And so those small marginal numbers of going from like 11% of the Black vote to 15% of the Black vote, going from 15% of the Black vote to 17% of the Black vote, that can make huge differences, not just in the national election, but also in all these state and local elections around the country. And the reason why Democrats are bleeding Black voters and Latino voters and Arab voters and Asian voters is because of the institutionalism of the party versus the anti-institutionalism of Trump and the MAGA movement. And it's a problem that we have to address head on in 2026 and 2028 if we're going to have a chance to stop this guy.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.
Out 10 popular laws that are ruining America. How did you arrive? First of all, I take it your list is actually longer. So how did you arrive at these specific 10?
Yeah, Roland, look, scoping was obviously the hardest problem for the book. There are lots of laws. Many of them are dumb. I have not read them all. The way that I scoped, the way that I whittled it down to 10 is that I thought of two things. One, what are laws that we can just repeal, right? Not laws that we need to reform or massage or bring into the modern age. What can we just be rid of? A great example of this is the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, right? Now, I do not like the Anti-Drug Abuse Act. I do not like our drug laws. I think they are provably racist and have caused great damage to multiple communities, including ours. However, I'm not going to say that we should repeal all drug laws, right? We should probably still have some drug laws. I don't work for the Sackler family. I'm not trying to get people hooked on opioids. There should be some, minimum standard of drug laws in the country. They should be fair. They should be equal. They shouldn't be racist, whatever. But the Anti-Drug Abuse Act is an example of a law that needs to be reformed. The laws that I wrote about in the book, the 10 that I've picked, were laws that can be struck, just gotten rid of, that don't need to be reformed, that are so evil, so racist, so stupid, so misogynist, that we can just be rid of them, right? So that was the first focusing mechanism. And the second was, as I say in the title of the book, these are 10 popular laws that are ruining America. All of the laws that I focused on in the book enjoyed broad bipartisan support when they passed. Now, in a lot of cases, Democrats belatedly are just like, oh, that was a bad idea. We shouldn't have done that. We shouldn't have done the 1994 crime bill. Whoops, that was a huge mistake, right? But at the time, the 1994 crime bill, the Armed Career Criminals Act, these were laws that were spearheaded and championed by not just Republicans, but also Democrats. You don't get the 1994 crime bill if you don't have the Congressional Black Caucus getting it over the line. Those were critical CBC votes that got the 1994 crime bill passed, right? So the other scoping for the book were people wanted these laws when they were passed, and they're terrible. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you how in real time. I never ask people in the book to just take my word for it. I go and I pull out what the people who wrote or passed the law, what they said the law was intended to do. And in most cases, they're pretty honest about the racism or the misogyny or the stupidity that they wanted to do when they passed those laws. And again, in a lot of cases, Democrats have belatedly, come to Jesus and been like, oh, that was a terrible mistake, but the laws still exist. And again, that's the problem with the sledgehammer, right? We pass these terrible laws. We later realize the law was bad, but we don't, when we have the opportunity, take them away. We don't get rid of them. They just linger on so that Republicans, whenever they get an opportunity, can make those laws worse and worse and worse, building on the rotten foundation that these laws laid in the first place.
What's up, y'all? Look, Fanbase is more than a platform. It's a movement to empower creators, offering a unique opportunity for everyday people to invest in Black-owned tech, infrastructure, and help shape the future of social media. Investing in technology is essential for creating long-term wealth and influence in the digital age. The Black community must not only consume tech, we must own it.
Discover how equity crowdfunding can serve as a powerful tool for funding Black businesses, allowing entrepreneurs to raise capital directly through their community through the Jobs Act.
When it comes to, so you talked about the drug laws, and obviously one of the ones that really resonates with us is voting rights.
Yeah, so my argument in the book is that every single voter registration law should be repealed, right? And that's different from voter eligibility requirements. I believe that we still need voter eligibility requirements, and I don't want people to at me. I'm not saying that dead people can vote. You're ineligible to vote if you're not alive. I think that's a fair standard. I'm not even saying that non-citizens can vote. I can make an argument that we should allow non-citizens to vote, but that's not the argument I make in the book. I'm like, all right, you want to say that citizenship is a requirement for voting rights? That's fine. Once you meet the eligibility requirements, why should you have to pre-register? Right? If I am eligible to vote, why can't I just show up and vote? Why do I have to register days, weeks, sometimes months in advance? Why do I have to go through a second hoop when I'm already eligible to vote? You see, voter registration requirements do not prevent ineligible voters from voting. Voter eligibility requirements prevents that.
And then, of course, when the Supreme Court ruled that, it was a case of Ohio, white guy sued. You haven't voted in the last 2 or 3 elections, so yeah, they got to remove you from the polls. Wait, what? Why the hell?
Voter purges happen because of voter registration requirements, not voter eligibility requirements, right? People who are eligible to vote, should be allowed to show up and vote for whoever they want, whenever there's an election, they are being prevented from voting because of these ridiculous registration requirements, right? We should get rid of them. And again, not only do you not have to take my word for it, this is not a solution that I am the only person that has come up with. Every other major democracy on this earth either has automatic registration, mandatory registration, or same-day registration. Every other democracy collapses the friction between being eligible to vote and being registered to vote. But they don't have that distinction. We are the only one that has this two-step process. First, be eligible, then prove registration, usually weeks or months in advance before you're actually allowed to vote. It's stupid, right? We have one state in this country that doesn't have voter registration requirements. North Dakota. There are a lot of voter fraud or voter fraud stories coming out of North Dakota. Yeah. Is North Dakota even a blue state? I mean, people always are attacking me saying like, oh, I'm just trying to make it easier for Democrats to win. Not necessarily. North Dakota is not a blue state, and it has no registration requirements. The reason why North Dakota has no registration requirements is because North Dakota has, relatively speaking, a large Native American population, and they want to make it easier for the Native people to vote. And the way to make it easier for Native people to vote is to not have a registration requirement. You have an eligibility requirement. You show up. Hey, I'm eligible to vote. Great. You vote. Boom. Simple. Democratic. That's all you need. And it's all North Dakota needs. It's all France needs. It's all Israel needs. It's all Chile needs. It's all the UK needs. It's all Australia needs. I can list the countries. We are alone in our stupidity over voter registration.
And again, when you have the mansions of the world who, they love and they praise John Lewis and Christian cinema, but then they prevent the John Lewis, voter law from actually being passed. And then Democrats privately agreed to a mansions deal. Oh, let's go forward with voter ID, things along those lines, undercutting all of the progressive legal arguments.
Right. The Democrats, again, when they come into office, they don't do the things necessary to expand voting rights. The best you can hope for Democrats is that they will try to prevent the further restriction of voting rights. But it's hard to get people to vote for we're stopping the further restriction. Right?
Or even in blue states. I mean, look, you're there in New York State. New York State for a very long time had some of the worst voting laws in America. They were worse than a lot of red states. Still
does. In my chapter on voter registration, I focus on New York's laws, not Texas, not Florida, not one of these red states. New York still has some of the worst voting laws in the country. Why? Because having voter restrictions, having voter suppression helps the establishment, right? In New York.
So why? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
In New York, the way that it really works is that it makes it very hard to vote in New York if you are a renter, which, a city, when you think about New York City, a city with 8 million people, most of them renters.
A lot of renters.
What that does is that it decreases the power of New York City vis-a-vis the rest of the state. In fairness, the first massive voter registration law in the country was passed in New York in the 1870s. Why? Because New York was getting a lot of immigrants from Europe, was getting a lot of former freed slaves migrating up from the South, and they decided that they didn't want to have all those people who were going to be eligible to vote. They didn't want to have all those people able to vote, so they added a voter registration requirement. But critically, that voter registration requirement in New York State only applied to New York City. So if you lived in Brooklyn, you had to register to vote. But if you lived in Syracuse, if you lived in Albany, if you lived on Long Island, you didn't have to register to vote. Why? Because white folks with money lived in those places, whereas black people, immigrants, lived in the city, and those were the people they didn't want to allow to vote. New York State is not just one of the worst now, it's one of the worst historically when it comes to voting rights.
So why do voting rights advocates, why do they just keep skipping New York State? Like you don't see voting rights groups holding mass rallies in Albany or New York City or whatever the heck. What? Because it's blue?
Because it's blue. I mean, that's the only answer that I've got. Because it's blue. Because they think that they've got bigger fish to fry. And if you make it easier for people to register vote, and vote in states like North Carolina and states like Mississippi, obviously in states like Georgia, you can flip those states. You can turn those states from red to blue because, as we know, Texas, and the line about Texas is always, Texas is not a red state, it's a non-voting state. right? And if you got a lot of more people registered in Texas, you could flip Texas blue, and that would completely change the map of America. So I understand why they focus some of their efforts, more of their efforts, in places in the South as opposed to New York State. But I think it would show how nonpartisan the voting rights and voter registration movement is if they had as much smoke for New York as they have for places in the South. Because again, it doesn't have to be a partisan issue. Making sure that it's easy and frictionless for people to register to vote and then vote doesn't necessarily mean that Democrats win. It means that Americans win. It means that Americans get to participate in their government as was promised to us in our flawed Constitution. That's a bigger goal than any one party being in power in any one state. Of course, the Republicans understand that their best chance of winning is to have the fewest amount of people voting, right? And that's where we get to the voter ID laws. Now, I've made the argument, Roland, that if you gave me automatic registration, if you gave me the mandatory registration, automatic registration, portable registration also being entirely critical, right? So like your registration should follow you when you move. You shouldn't have to re-register, right? Going back to New York, if I move from apartment 2B to apartment 1A in my own building, I got to re-register to vote. So a huge thing is voter registration portability is something that we need in this country. But if you gave me all of that, I would give you voter ID. If you want to give me a national voter ID that everybody can get, that is free. Free is critical because the 24th Amendment constitutionally prohibits a poll tax, and having an ID that you have to pay for becomes a form of poll tax, however small you might argue that it is. So if you give me a free, easily accessible national ID, and in exchange, you give me national voter registration and portability and automatic registration, I make that trade every day. I make that trade every day. You know who doesn't? The Republicans. Because the Republicans aren't actually concerned with voter fraud. They don't actually want to stop voter fraud because voter fraud doesn't really exist. They want to stop people from voting. And my plan would make it easier for eligible citizens to vote, even if they had to get an ID to prove that they are eligible. And that's why Republicans will never go for it.
Hey y'all, welcome to The Other Side of Change, only on the Black Star Network and hosted by myself, Rhea Baker, and my good sis, Jamira Burley. We are just two millennial women tackling everything at the intersection of politics, gender, and pop culture.
And we don't just settle for commentary. This is about solution-driven dialogue to get us to the world as it could be and not just as it is.
Watch us on the Black Star Network, so tune in to The Other Side of Change.
Have you had elected officials reach out to you and say, damn, Ellie, you're making a lot of sense. We're going to take up this cause?
Man, I don't punch that far above my weight.
No, man. Look. You're on television, you're on radio, you do podcasts, all these different things. You've been laying these things out, and are they listening? I mean, are they literally? Hey, Ellie, you know what? Walk me through this. Explain to me how we can do this, or because that's what the right does. The right is they've always listened to their thinkers. A lot of the things that we see today came out of conservative think tanks, from authors. When you actually look at Donald Trump's entire campaign and how he operates, he completely ripped off Pat Buchanan.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, the conservative think tank mafia is responsible for many of the conservative and Republican ideas, whereas the Democrats do not use its far more august, I would argue, think tank mafia to inform their own policies and positions. And there are a couple of reasons for that, right? Number one, Democrats do not accept that they are the party that they are, right? The Democrats want to be at the establishment levels, they want to be the white working class party. They're still waiting for Reagan voters to come back home to the Democratic Party. Now, you and I know that that ain't never going to happen, but many Democratic officials, many people in power still believe that there is a unwashed mass of white working class people who are just about to vote for Democrats. And so in that, if you believe that, listening to a black guy like me doesn't seem to be in your best interest, because I'm not the guy that you want to send to, Huntington, West Virginia, to convince some coal miners to vote for the Democratic Party. Even though the ideas that I have would help coal miners in West Virginia, I'm not the messenger necessarily that you want to have. So that's one of the reasons why we don't listen to our think tank mafia. But I think so that's kind of like on the ground. But I think in a larger sense, it's not so much that people aren't listening to people like me. It's who's listening to people like me, right? The younger people in our party do, I've had conversations with some of the younger representatives and some of the younger legislators and some of the younger candidates. I do have those conversations, and I know for a fact that there are younger people, not just people of color, but primarily people of color, not just women, but primarily women, who are thinking along my lines and are interested in my ideas or ideas from people like me and like us, right? The problem is that those people are not in leadership establishment positions, right? And there's the old guard kind of won't get out of the way and let the new guard take the leadership roles and become the tip of the spear. There's still just a lot of old guard dead hand control over the party. Now, not every...
Which is why I believe what that new guard has to understand is they've got to organize and mobilize external pressure in order to bring that to bear. Right. The reality is, I don't care what it is, you cannot succeed solely with an inside game.
Yes.
When you are an agitator, when you're operating guerrilla warfare, when you are an insurgent, you cannot play by traditional rules. And I think they've got to have forces outside. And this is the hardest thing for people to understand. You got to have folk who are willing to unleash protesters, demonstrators against folk who you say, hey, I agree with you last week because this thing is so important. We need to win it all.
100%. You need an outside game. That's one of the reasons why I don't run for office. I think I'm more effective on the outside than I would ever be on the inside.
I'm way too. Actually, I think here's the problem. Actually, it's not a problem. I think folks like you and I, the problem is we are so honest that we might start with 20,000 votes and end up with 5.
Yeah.
because we're not tolerating people's bullshit. We're not. It's like when people. I remember somebody asked me and said, every place that I've worked in, they've asked me to run for office. I said, let me explain to y'all how this is going to go. A constituent is going to come up to me and they're going to say, I want you to do something about our schools. And my response then is going to be, do you have any children in the school? And they're going to say, yes, I do. I said, where do they go to school? Then they're going to say, said elementary school. And I'm going to say, oh, you remember the PTA? And they're going to say no. And then I'm going to say, how in the hell can you ask me to fix your schools when your sorry ass can't even join your own PTA? See, right there, that voter's gone. Because I just believe, Ellie, that the greatest fear in our society, and I don't mean black people, I mean everybody, people hate accountability.
I think I would definitely put that in the top 5. People do not like to be called, on their own bullshit. I also think that like to run for office, to be a politician, you have to believe that there is a certain institutional procedure to all of this stuff that can be massaged and bent to your will. And I don't necessarily believe that. That's why, again, I think I'm better on the outside pushing people to become more educated and to become more knowledgeable, and to, as I say in the book, don't vote harder, vote smarter. I think that I have a role to play there. I think if you put me in Congress, I'm weakened in some way, because Congress is about compromise. Congress is about working across the aisle and trying to work together where you can with the people who you can't, like. And that's never been my kind of mode of even thinking, much less my reality, right? So I don't think that I would be great in that kind of role, but there are people who are great in that kind of role. And the people who really want to do change right now tend to be the younger people. And I don't want to, I'm not being ageist. Hank Johnson is one of, I think the best congressmen that we have. And I've had the opportunity to talk to him quite a few times about some of my ideas. I think he's a great guy. So I don't want to be just ageist about this whole thing. But there is a sense that there is an old guard that is squelching the progress and the uprising from the younger parts of the Democratic Party. And it's something that we need to figure out now, right? Not 4 years from now, not 8 years from now, not just when these people finally die. We need to figure that out now. I do not know that we will have a free and fair midterm election in 2026. I do not know that we will have a free and fair presidential election in 2028. But I am certain we will have a free and fair Democratic primary. And it is in that free and fair Democratic primary where the new generation and the people who are sick, who are sick of this government, need to make their voices heard. Democrats in 2026 who are insufficiently committed to fighting fascism need to get got in that 2026 primary. If you take out some, you can start to change the entire party. I always tell people, and I know you do this too, Roland, the Tea Party, which is what became the MAGA party. They announced themselves to the world, not by beating a Democrat, not by beating Barack Obama, who was curb stomping them in any kind of public polling. They announced themselves to the world by beating a Republican, Eric Cantor in Northern Virginia, right? A conservative, but moderate conservative, up and coming rising star in the Republican leadership. The Tea Party took his ass out in a primary in Northern Virginia. He
was shocked and stunned. He thought he was coasting, and the guy who beat him had no money.
Yeah, and they lost the seat. The Republicans, the Tea Party took him out, put a crazy Tea Party conservative up, and they got their ass blown out of that seat in the purpling Northern Virginia. But it made the entire Republican Party stand up and notice, oh, wait, we got to take these Tea Party people seriously. They've got real political power. And that is what the young, up-and-coming part of the Democratic Party needs to do in 2026. We got to take out some of these old heads, some of these establishment figures, some of these people who are insufficiently committed to fighting fascism. And even if you lose a seat in a general, taking them out in the primary is what starts to make the rest of the Democratic Party take you seriously and realize that they have to play ball with your issues and along your lines of thinking, or else they'll be the next person to lose a primary. We got to not be so concerned about electability in November and take our primaries in June and July and August incredibly seriously in 2026.
So I take it what David Hogue is doing, does it freak you out and make you mad the way it is doing others?
No, of course not. That's what we need. And we need to let these young people lead. I've said before, like, I'm Gen X. I'm what the white people would call Gen X, right? My generation failed. My generation.
In fact, our generation is the only demographic where a majority supported Trump.
Yep. The only one. Our generation is a failure. We had an opportunity to push the rock forward. We had an opportunity to build on the Barack Obamas of the world, and we failed miserably. That means, guess what, folks? We cede our right to lead. Our failure has ceded our right to lead and must pass to the next generation, the millennials and the Gen Zers. They're the ones who have to lead now because we failed. What I can do as an old head, as a Gen Xer, right? My role is to help them, right? My role, I like this, the analogy that I've made is that, like, look, I'm a dad. I'm supposed to go to the game and bring orange slices, right? I'm not supposed to play in the game. I'm not supposed to score the goal. I'm not supposed to dunk the ball. I'm supposed to bring orange slices. I'm supposed to take the kids out for pizza after the game, right? And if they want to, while we're having pizza, if they want to ask me a question or access my knowledge, I'm happy to share. I'm happy to lend them my expertise in the ways that they think it's helpful, but I'm not the leader anymore. I'm too old. And again, statistically speaking, I've already failed. So it's got to be on them. And all I'm supposed to do is help, right? Because I've got things that they don't have. And I'm not just talking about experience. I got things they don't have, like disposable freaking income, right? Not a lot. I wish I had more, but I got a lot more than a lot of these young kids, right? I can at least spell the word mortgage, right? That they're never gonna, that in Trump's economy, they're never gonna get an opportunity to have, right? So I've got some experience, I've got some expertise, I've got some income. I can help them in their quest, but it's got to be their quest, and they've got to be the ones that are leading it, and we've got to be the ones that are in a support role. And that is fine with me. I'm willing to help, but there are far too many in our generation, to say nothing of the boomers, who won't get out of the way, who won't help, and won't let the kids lead. Look, the kids are going to make mistakes. They're young. That's part of growing up, right? They're going to make mistakes. They're going to say things maybe they shouldn't have said. They're going to do things maybe in a way that won't work, but sometimes it will work. Sometimes they'll succeed. You know, why would a 30-year-old would-be candidate come asking me what I think our TikTok strategy should be, right? I don't know. I'm not digital native, right? You want to ask me how to write a print magazine article? I have some thoughts, but you want to ask me how to, like, do your campaign ad on YouTube? I'm probably not the guy to ask. The kids are going to have to lead, and we are going to have to support them in their efforts. And that's how we're going to beat the guy.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
All book authors this, and that is, as they were writing their book, as they were researching their book, as they were doing interviews, things along those lines. What was their wow moment? So for you, as you were putting together Bad Law? What was a wild moment? Was there something that you heard, you saw that made you even go, damn, wow, that's crazy?
Yeah, so I wrote about the Immigration and Nationalization Act and how that needs to be repealed, right? And as I'm researching how they passed this law in 1921, I came across their star scientists, the guys whose literal scientific theories were used as a justification, not just for the law, which is our fundamental alpha immigration law, but also for why the law was important and how the law should be written. And this scientist was named Harry Laughlin, which is a name that I recognized, and I couldn't figure out why I recognized the name until I did a little Google searching, and I realized that Harry Laughlin was the chief American eugenicist of that age. He was so popular and famous for his theories on eugenics that Nazi Germany imported him, emigrated him to Germany to teach the Nazis about eugenics, right? The Nazi eugenics theory was given to them by an American, specifically by this guy, Harry Laughlin. He literally got a medal in 1938 from the University of Heidelberg. Do you know how much of a bad dude you needed to be to get a medal from the University of Heidelberg in 1938, right? You're not a good guy. And this is the guy who in 1921 was key to writing our immigration laws, so that literally the congressman now talking to Dr. Laughlin and praising his work on eugenics says that the reason why we need the 1921 Immigration and Nationality Act is to stop the mongrelization of the white race by the inferior races. And
that sounds very similar to they're poisoning our blood.
Yep.
Didn't Trump say that?
It's a one-to-one, it's a linear comparison, it's a linear link, right? And so yeah, that was a wow moment for me when I look, I knew the immigration laws were racist, but that you've literally got Nazi eugenics theory laced into the American immigration system. That was wow. And after I took a shower because it was so gross to like read his science and read his theories, I was like, people should know this. People need to know where these laws come from.
Well, it's sort of like in Virginia, when Terry McAuliffe was the governor, and when he was talking about the felony disenfranchisement laws, and the story came out where a state representative or state senator literally said on the floor, "This is to keep the darkies from voting," or he may have said, "This is to keep the niggers from voting." And what I tell people is, people today are defending laws, and then when people say, "Oh, those things are so old, you shouldn't bring those up," no, that's when you say, no, let's go to the root. What was the root cause of this law? What were they talking about then? And it is always important, and that's also why I tell people you can't ignore even Supreme Court dissents, because when you look at Alito today, Justice Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas does the exact same thing. They are referencing dissents as well as majority opinions from the 1800s.
Yeah,
and they are referencing people. They're referencing, frankly, white supremacists.
The thing that I do consistently in the book is that I don't ask people to take my word for it. I show them what the people who passed the laws said in real time about why they wanted the law to be passed.
There you go.
Because so often these people were honest. Actually, they told you directly they wanted to pass the law.
Yeah, because it was fine. Because then, remember at that time, it was all everybody was clear. I don't like y'all. I'm racist. Hey, we're good. It's only today where,
right?
Don't.
And people act like these statements that they made don't matter. And all I'm trying to show people is that, well, if this is what they want, this is what they said they wanted to do. Now here's how the law that they wrote does exactly what they said they wanted it to do.
They achieved their goal.
Succeeded, right? To say that these statements don't matter, you have to imagine that these people failed, right? That these people wanted to do racism, but didn't know how to do racism in the law, and they were just too stupid to write the law the way they wanted to. Well, what if they weren't? What if they were smart? What if they accomplished their goals? And for at least these 10 laws, I try to show how these racist or misogynist or stupid people, anti-poverty people, literally accomplish the goals that they specifically set out to accomplish when they wrote the law.
Folks, the book is called Bad Law, the 10 popular laws that are ruining America. It is from the Silver Fro man himself, Ellie Mistel. Ellie, I appreciate it and praise the Lord. You upgraded your system because I would have cussed you out. You had them big ass headphones on, looking like you had a Sony Walkman under the table from the 1980s.
There is a part of me that still wants to do these like Radio Raheem, just like have the speaker like this. But
we now have JBL speakers that we can roll. Ellie, I appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for your time, Roland.
All right, folks, great conversation with Ellie. When we come back, I'll talk with the author of a book that details the nation's first paramedics. Yes, a group of brothers in Pittsburgh. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Right.
What's up, y'all? Look, Fanbase is more than a platform. It's a movement to empower creators, offering a unique opportunity for everyday people to invest in Black-owned tech, infrastructure, and help shape the future of social media. Investing in technology is essential for creating long-term wealth and influence in the digital age. The Black community must not only consume tech, we must own it.
Discover how equity crowdfunding can serve as a powerful tool for funding Black businesses, allowing entrepreneurs to raise capital directly through their community through the Jobs Act.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches. I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay Black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now. We have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? Welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. I didn't know this, and y'all know how I love history, but the first paramedics in the United States, African American, yes, founded in 1967 in Pittsburgh, the predominantly Black Hill District there in Pittsburgh. Kevin Hazard has a new book called American Sirens, and he lays out how this started and pays tribute to these unsung heroes and the challenges that they face, including systemic racism and institutional adversity. Kevin, there's so many stories. I mean, my God, we could just go on and on and on of amazing things African Americans have done that have not gotten credit, that people don't mention. And this historical reality that the first paramedics were Black, a lot of people had never heard of this until that excerpt from the Max series, The Pit, talked about it. This is just unbelievable. When did you first find out about this incredible story?
Summer of 2018. I'd spent a decade as a paramedic in Atlanta, and I wrote a memoir about that experience. And someone who read it reached out to me and said, "Hey, I read your book. Have you ever heard this other story? Do you know how it all began?" And I had not. So I started researching Freedom House, because those are two words that I had never heard before. And I didn't know what it was. And immediately what I realized was that Freedom House was where all of this began. So, like I said, I spent a decade as a paramedic. It was a formative 10 years of my life. And I thought I understood the history. I thought I understood the science and the culture of it. Beginning to research this, I realized I didn't. And then even more so, I realized nobody did, that there was no definitive account of how in 1966, a doctor looked around and said, "My God, there are thousands of people dying for lack of a very simple but advanced new branch of emergency medicine. And if nobody else is going to create it, I'm going to create it." And then, to top that off, he can't get anybody to fund it. He certainly can't get anybody to join it. And, he happened to be living in Pittsburgh at the time. And there just so happened to be a nonprofit in the city of Pittsburgh based in the Hill District, which, is a predominantly Black neighborhood in the city. And what they were trying to do was bring job opportunities to local residents. They were having an incredibly difficult time doing it. And so they walked into the hospital one day with a very, basic plan to say, "Hey, what if we can bring our residents to the hospital? Is there a way we can sort of create this very low tech ambulance service?" And the doctor, Peter Saffer, looks across at Jim McCoy, who was running Freedom House Ambulance, and he said, "No, we are not going to do a low tech ambulance service. We're going to change the world." And through the course of that meeting, two things come out. One is that the world's first paramedics are going to be from the city of Pittsburgh. And the second is that the world's first paramedics are going to be Black men from the Hill District.
Okay, so prior to this, what happened? Either you drove yourself to the hospital, or you were screwed, or someone came to the house?
Yeah, 100%. It depended on where you live. There are some cities where it might be a volunteer fire department. There's some places where it was a funeral home, which, if you think about it, makes sense. It's the only business with a vehicle that can transport a person who's lying down. But what a horrible start to your emergency. You're hoping that your family member doesn't die, and what screeches up in front is a hearse, and two undertakers hop out and have to sweep flower petals out of the back of the hearse, and then load your family member in and race them to the hospital. They're going to get paid about $2,000 for the funeral, maybe $20 for the ambulance ride, so you can see, where their loyalties really lied. I mean, it was a horrible situation. And a lot of people were dying because nobody who showed up had any kind of training. In the city of Pittsburgh, what you had was a police-borne ambulance service. So it was usually older cops who drove around an old beat-up paddy wagon. It had a canvas stretcher. They had no equipment. They had no training. They had no ability to do anything but take you to the hospital. In fact, they didn't even ride with you. But you got a ride, depending on who you were. In the Hill District, which again, low income, high crime, vast majority of the people living there were Black. And the reason that neighborhood was the way it was because the city had routinely sort of chipped away at its infrastructure, had denied it funding. Because of redlining in real estate laws, people living there were not allowed to move out into other areas. So it just got continually cramped. So if the cops got a call in that area, they might show up, they might not. When they did show up, they might transport you and they might not. One of the future paramedics has, an incredible story of his mother having a stroke, and he called for help. And, this paddy wagon pulls up, two aging cops amble out. They slowly make their way inside. They take one look at his mother, who has never had a drink in her life, and said, "She's drunk." He knew his mother was having a stroke. He fought with them. He argued, finally convinced them to take her to the hospital, but they refused to carry her. So he had to carry his own mother to the back of this paddy wagon. He laid her in. They shut the doors and drove away. His mother rode in the back alone to the hospital, where she later died of a stroke. So this was the sort of care that existed around the country. In 1965, a report was released that said you are more likely to survive a gunshot wound in Vietnam than you were in the U.S. And the reason was that in Vietnam, you have a corpsman. In the U.S., you have the volunteer fire department, you have the funeral home, or you have two indifferent police officers who show up to your house at a paddy wagon, none of whom are trained. And that's what existed prior to Freedom House.
So these young men who started Freedom House, what was their prior experience? Were they healthcare practitioners? Were they in the military? I mean, how did this even just come up to create this?
So two things happened simultaneously. One is Peter Safar, who is the doctor who invented CPR. His own daughter died of an asthma attack because the people who showed up to her emergency were not able to treat her. So by the time she got to the hospital, she was dead. He took that experience and turned it into action. And so he spent about a year, developed what would become the first paramedic curriculum. So that happens. So you have this incredibly, advanced training program. They're able, anyone who went through his program would be able to do essentially what a paramedic does today. But he didn't have the people. And so, the guys who eventually were recruited for this, I mean, think about the sales pitch for a second. This is an 8, maybe 9-month training course, 5 days a week, occasionally on the weekends, oftentimes at night. You've got to walk away from your life to do this. So this isn't, people who say yes to this aren't people with a lot of options, especially when you consider that when you finish this course, you've been trained for a job that technically does not exist. So what are you even going to do when you come out of this? So the guys that he and Jim McCoy recruited, some of them were military veterans, some of them were high school dropouts, some were just high school graduates, a few had criminal records. A bunch of them, though, the majority of them were just young guys who the world had said, you don't really have a place. And they were looking to find a way to make their mark. And it just so happened that the place they were going to make their mark was in the back of an ambulance.
So, these two docs. So, were there one or two doctors? Is it Safar and someone else?
Yeah, Safar was the doctor, and then McCoy was the man who ran the nonprofit that recruited the people.
Gotcha. And explain this. Explain this situation with this former governor of Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
and the former mayor of Pittsburgh, because it's just interesting how all of these different things intersect that leads to this incredible story.
So, as is the case today, first responders are the last ones to get any sort of government funding. So, when Safar comes up with this idea, his daughter died in 1966, in June of 1966, and so he immediately begins designing this idea for a paramedic force. Nobody in the city wants to pay for it. They don't think they need it. They don't think they want to pay for it. It's not something that anybody has any interest in. So jump forward to November of that year. Is a tightly contested gubernatorial race in the state of Pennsylvania. In the run up to the final days of the election, a huge Democratic rally is planned for downtown. The keynote speaker is going to be a former mayor of Pittsburgh, former governor of Pennsylvania by the name of David Lawrence. He gets in front of the crowd. He gets about 2 words into his speech and he topples over with a heart attack, drops to the floor, not breathing, no heartbeat. So panic breaks out among the crowd and somebody in the room calls for help. Now, there happened to be a nurse in the room named Karen McGuire, and she runs forward. She pushes people out of the way. She checks for a pulse, doesn't find him. Checks for breathing. He's not breathing. And she begins CPR. So as this guy hits the ground, he has advanced care immediately taking place at his side, which is the best case scenario. Within a few minutes, the police-borne ambulance service arrives. And again, it's 2 cops. They have a canvas stretcher. They had a bottle of oxygen that was either empty or broken. Accounts differ, but either way, it was completely useless. They push Nurse McGuire out of the way. So they immediately stop care. They pick up Lawrence, who was a large man. They pick him up. They put him on the canvas stretcher, and they start struggling through the crowd to get him out of there. Karen sees this and realizes these guys aren't going to do anything. So she runs to keep up with them.
She catches him outside, sees them putting him in the back of this paddy wagon alone. So she jumps in at the last second, tries to resume CPR, but they're speeding through the streets. So she's just thrown around in the back of this truck. It's nothing done. A few minutes later, they pull up to the hospital, and who's the doctor there to meet them but Peter Safar, the guy who invented CPR and the guy who has been harassing the city for months to start a paramedic corps. He meets David Lawrence, who is the city's most famous citizen, and he sees that he is dead, despite the fact that the moment he needed care, he had it. When the city's version of care arrived, he lost it. And because of that, he was brain dead when he arrived at the hospital. This provides the catalyst that gets the city to finally say yes. It's so often the case. It doesn't matter that a child died of an asthma attack. It doesn't matter that Mitch Brown's mother died of a stroke because the cops refused to help her. What mattered was that a very famous man died, and the city saw for itself. Thousands of people witnessed it firsthand, but it was covered heavily in the newspapers and on TV. Everybody knew that David Lawrence died because the city was lacking in its healthcare infrastructure. So finally, they turned to Safar and they said, fine, if you want to do this thing, go ahead and do it.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.
There were no paramedics anywhere else in the country, right?
No, nothing like this exists anywhere in the country. And again, 1965, a group of physicians put out this pamphlet decrying how bad pre-hospital care is in the United States. Vietnam is going on, so you have physicians who are returning home and who have experience with corpsmen who are saying, this is doable. Somebody could do this. We could train people to save lives. 1965 alone, more Americans die in auto accidents than were killed in the entirety of the Korean War. This is avoidable traumatic deaths is an epidemic in the mid-1960s in America. So people wanted change, but it wasn't happening. And, here is Peter Safar, this incredibly driven, incredibly bright guy who, is living off of a horrible bit of tragedy and is helped along by a very public and preventable death.
So what's interesting here is that, we hear a lot about, the war on poverty. This is one of the great success stories of the war on poverty. And if you listen to conservatives, you think that the war on poverty was a total abject failure. No.
This is, you're right. I mean, this is the perfect example of, a program that was set up. It had private funding, it had public funding, and it was set up specifically in a neighborhood that, so in the early 1950s, U.S. government is worried about the state of inner city America because, there's a lot of crumbling infrastructure, there's people moving out, and they're afraid that this is going to be a hotbed for communist infiltration. And so they come up with the urban renewal program, which is if you fix your blighted areas and you put in highways and hospitals and theaters and universities, we'll help you pay for that. So cities begin tearing down neighborhoods. And of course, what are you going to tear down? You're going to tear down the lowest income. You're going to tear down, the poorest area, the most beaten up area, the area with no ability to say, hey, hold on, what about us? So in the city of Pittsburgh, that was the Hill District, which up until that point, had been known as the Harlem of the Midwest. It was a neighborhood known for its famous jazz clubs. Lena Horne, Louis Armstrong routinely went there. It had 2 Negro League baseball teams. Satchel Paige was a pitcher on one of these. It had the nation's largest Black-owned newspaper, the Pittsburgh Courier, very famous newspaper. It covered all the, the early civil rights stuff that Thurgood Marshall was involved in. It was a well-known historic area, and then the city decides, well, we want to build a highway and we want to build a civic center, and so they tear down 2/3 of the neighborhood. And again, because Black residents were not allowed to buy houses in white neighborhoods, the people living there were stuck. So overnight, thousands, tens of thousands of people are disenfranchised, so they're all just pushed into the remaining 1/3 of that neighborhood. So immediately by the early to mid 1960s, jobs are down, income's down, hope is down, which of course means that crime and drugs go up. And that's what the Hill District was facing when James McCoy, who was a civil rights activist, started Freedom House. He was trying to find a jobs program for people he knew were worth more than the outside world thought of them as. And
but what was crazy though is Freedom House wasn't doing medical services. I love what you say here. It says Freedom House was the brainchild of McCoy. Let me go ahead and say, as you write, a Houston native. Brainchild of McCoy, a civil rights activist with a long-term goal of fostering Black-owned businesses. In the meantime, to build capital as the organization got on its feet, Freedom House was selling produce in the street from the back of a truck. And it was this truck that grabbed Hallen's attention. If you could move produce, then you could probably also move people. At least that's how Hallen saw it. Oh, they're moving produce. They can move people. That is crazy.
It's nuts. It's nuts. So Phil Hallen, he runs this nonprofit funder. So they're just a philanthropy that's focused specifically on medicine and areas where the healthcare system has been depleted through racism. Hallen had a history with EMS. He had a job when he was getting his PhD. He was working at a hospital. He would carry severed limbs from the OR down to the incinerator. He worked part-time on an ambulance. So he had some sense of what it was. He moves to Pittsburgh and he knows that the EMS service in the U.S. is bad. And he sees it's particularly bad in Pittsburgh, especially bad in the Hill. And so he's looking for a way to fix this. And like you said, he's reading the newspaper one day and he sees an article about Freedom House delivering produce around its neighborhood. August Wilson, he wrote that play Jitney based on, a group of people who couldn't get a cab. And so had this sort of makeshift cab system. They couldn't get any sort of help in the city. And Phil Hallen knew this. And of course, Jim McCoy knew this. And that's why McCoy had set up the produce thing. And so Hallen sees it and says, well, man, if you can move a tomato, you can move a person. Let's figure out a way to do this. And that's what brings the two of them to Presbyterian University Hospital, where they meet Peter Saffer, who's trying desperately to get an ambulance system off the ground, but doesn't have any people willing to take that risk.
Right. So Hallen wants to do this here, but McCoy is looking for job opportunities for African Americans, and then those two forces merge. So this was a jobs program. I guess if Phil Hallen had some other kind of idea, that's what this would have turned out into. But so this didn't start off as from a McCoy. Well, hey, let's create this healthcare deal. It started off as a jobs opportunity, and then those two combined forces, and then that's what we get. 100%.
McCoy, he looked at this much more than nobody knew. The word paramedic didn't exist, so nobody understood sort of Saffer's genius. McCoy was saying, hey, if we start an ambulance service, we're going to have trucks, which means you're going to need drivers, which means you're going to need mechanics. There's probably going to be some sort of dispatch system. So we're going to have to hire dispatchers. In his mind, he's hearing jobs. He's hearing, mechanic jobs. He's hearing driver jobs, dispatcher jobs, careers. What he had been offered before this came along was housekeeper, Gardner. Those aren't careers. Those are things that you're stuck into. He wanted a way to elevate the people in his neighborhood. The newspapers referred to people in the Hill as unemployables, which that means you don't have a job. That means you are not capable of gaining and holding a job. He didn't believe that. Nobody in the neighborhood believed that. And so they were looking for the opportunity. McCoy 100% sees this as a way to employ a lot of people.
So what was interesting to me is that this didn't start in white Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
That it start. I mean, that's still what strikes me. And so was Hallen specifically looking at this as an opportunity to provide jobs for African Americans, or was that just happenstance?
No, the jobs very specifically were for African Americans. What everybody assumed.
So Hallen's like, yo, we need this service.
Yep.
We need this service. And here's an opportunity to provide some jobs and economic opportunities for African Americans. Let's go.
100%. That's what they thought. But the presumption was like, this is going to be self-evident. You know, the moment somebody sees your emergency responded to by a trained professional who can save your life on the spot, who doesn't have to wait until you get there to the hospital, that the whole world was going to embrace this, which is what happened in every city in America, except for the one where it started. And the only difference is, of course, the one where it started, it was, staffed entirely by young black men as opposed to young white men, which is how it was in other areas. So they thought,
go ahead.
They thought it was going to expand. They thought like it would move to other neighborhoods in the city, that it would start in the Hill, but that it would move to everywhere in Pittsburgh because people would see the genius of it.
But it didn't.
It didn't.
And was it because they saw it was all black?
They will tell you, if you listen to some of the early meetings, the pushback was supposedly, well, we don't know if this works. We don't know if we can pay for this. We don't know if technically this is even legal to provide medicine outside of the hospital. There were all kinds of concerns. But again, the only place those concerns existed was the one place where the people providing the care were black. So they start in the Hill, and the one neighborhood that they expand to is downtown. Downtown has people of all stripes. So, these guys begin responding to calls, chest pain, shortness of breath, all the things that happen today. But some of the people now that they respond to are white. And for the first time, they find that their patients are actually weighing the option of, hey, do I want to die right here at my desk, or do I want to allow a black man to lay his hands on me? And
seriously?
Yeah. That was a real concern, and they had multiple occasions. They had to sit down and say, "Hey,
touch me, or I could die."
Yeah.
Let me just go ahead and go meet Jesus or go meet Satan.
Yeah. You're talking about a neighborhood or a city. People often think, when you think racism, you think segregation, you think Mississippi, you think Alabama. There were articles in the newspaper at the time when they began unwinding all of these redlining laws in real estate that did not allow you to sell your house to black homeowners. There were stories of white families who disliked their white neighbors and would intentionally sell their house to a black family just to spite their neighbors. So if you're going to sell a house, if you think it's so odious to live next door to a minority couple that you are going to sell your house to one to tick off your neighbors, imagine then that is the person who walks through the door to unbutton your wife's blouse to put electrodes on her chest. People really, really fought it. And these guys were stunned. These were young men who were used to having to explain, why are you doing what you're doing? Why aren't you just racing to the hospital? Why are you here messing around with my brother? Shouldn't you be gone already? They were used to having to explain, hey, we are paramedics. We are actually delivering care right here. What they were not used to have to explaining was, why us? Why are we the ones doing it? And are you sure that you really have to touch me?
hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, Dave.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Look, we still have examples of racist white folks who go into hospitals, and if it's a black doctor, they'll request somebody else, or say, don't you dare touch me. And it's like, okay, fine, you go right ahead and die then.
Yeah, I mean, it's real pathology.
Absolutely. Freedom House lasts for how long in Pittsburgh?
They began school in 67. They worked for the first time in 68. In fact, the first time paramedic ever took the streets anywhere in the world was in the immediate aftermath of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. In April of 1968. They were shut down in October of 1975.
And were they shut down because of citywide adoption, and they wanted a more rigorous program? Why did it shut down?
There was no more rigorous program. In 1975, President Gerald Ford realized that paramedics, based on what was happening in Pittsburgh, paramedics had taken off all across the country, and they had uneven training, uneven equipment, and uneven deployment. And so he said, we need to create a national standard. Freedom House was chosen to serve as a national standard. Their medical director, a doctor by the name of Nancy Caroline, wrote a textbook based on her work there. And that textbook is used to this day to train people all over the world. If you say emergency care in the streets to a pre-hospital provider, they will get misty-eyed. Everybody knows that book. Everybody knows Nancy Caroline. She took what she learned in Pittsburgh, she brought it to Israel and created their national healthcare program. This was as advanced an EMS program as existed anywhere in the city. The reason they were shut down is because a couple years earlier, there had been a heroin epidemic in Pittsburgh. It had started in the early 70s in New York and had finally crept over into Pittsburgh. Because Peter Saffer was an anesthesiologist by training, he turned to his paramedics and said, hey, look, heroin is just another opioid. I know how to reverse a heroin overdose in the same way that I know how to get someone out of anesthesia. It's a little known drug called Narcan. So the Freedom House paramedics are the first people in the world to use Narcan to reverse a heroin overdose. They do it. There just so happens to be a reporter from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette who's following them around when they reverse this overdose. She writes this incredible article about this work that they did on a dark night in a back alley. And people in the city reading this article have two responses. One, this is amazing. And two, why them? The rest of the city does not have this. The rest of the city, if any other neighborhood has an overdose, that young man, that young woman, they die right where they fell. But in Pittsburgh, in the Hill, the poorest and most downtrodden and overlooked neighborhood in the entire city, they're being saved. And they become victims of their own success. People see, well, wait a minute, this incredible thing that's happening, but it's happening there and it's happening to them and it's not happening to me. Why? And they get very angry and they turn to the mayor, who for years has been trying to stop Freedom House from growing, and he has to explain why. So finally he says, okay, we'll start a citywide program. But he doesn't use Peter Saffer, who invented CPR, who invented paramedics, who has been successfully running a paramedic program in his city now for 8 years. He gets new doctors and they recruit all new people, none of whom have any experience whatsoever on an ambulance. And he starts his own program. And it's perhaps not a coincidence that the paramedics that they roll out look nothing like the paramedics from Freedom House.
So Freedom House starts, and the white folks wanted nothing to do with them. But then in 75, when they start saving the lives of black people with heroin overdoses, then the white folks like, yo, hey, what about us? And then the mayor, obviously pissed off and jealous of this unit, says, fine, we'll go ahead and do this, but let's screw the most experienced people. Let's not listen to them, talk to them, hear from them. We'll just take it from here.
Yes, the people quite literally selected as the national standard by the President of the United States were not chosen to continue and expand EMS in their own city.
So
the
what
world's
happened?
first paramedics.
So what happened to, were they all men? Were there any black women who were part of this?
There were. So initially, I mean, they started in 1960. So, you know, there was certainly some chauvinism involved in the beginning. And women were hired as dispatchers, but several of the women were watching what was going on and saying, well, hold on a second. I think I can do that. And one in particular by the name of Darnella Wilson was very young, and she's working as a dispatcher, and she sees what's happening. And one of the guys who ran the program by the name of Walt Brown, he just saw something in Darnella, and he said to her one night, if you're interested in what's going on, get your butt on an ambulance and I'll show you. And so he takes her out, and her mind is blown. And she immediately says, I want to do this. So she begins training. She would go on to become a lifelong paramedic, a lifelong nurse, but it started there. So there were, there were some women who were involved in the program.
What happened to these men? Obviously, the city didn't bring them into their program. So what happened to them?
So perhaps not surprisingly, the city's program immediately belly flops. They brought in doctors who didn't know what they were doing. They brought in brand new paramedics who didn't know what they were doing. They tried to expand it and they didn't have enough money. Nothing was ready. And so the program begins to fail. So they turned to Nancy Caroline, who again would write the textbook that the entire world would learn how to be a paramedic on. And they said, okay, look, we'll hire you. So they wanted to bring her over to the city. And she said, yeah, I will absolutely come to the city. You bring all of my people. So she wrote out this list of demands. And most of them, honestly, all of them were really simple demands. Hire my people who want to be hired, keep them in their current shifts, let them practice at their current level. And the sort of the one thing that they really wanted more than anything was the final item on the list was publicly recognize Freedom House for the service it's provided this city for the last 7 years. So, and I pulled it out of her papers in Harvard. You can see her letter to the mayor and you can see the mayor's response. He reluctantly agrees to all of the demands except the last one. The only one that was free, which was a public recognition of the people who started it all. That is not on his list of things that he'll do. So the city hires as many of the Freedom House medics as want to go over. They're required to do that, but they're not required to keep them. So over the course of the next year, they essentially make life so miserable for them that the vast majority of the people who go over quit. Darnella Wilson was not even allowed to operate as a paramedic. They put her in the jail where she had to supervise prisoners. She had no experience with that whatsoever. She was very young. She was 18, 19 years old. It was a traumatic experience for her, but she was angry enough that she held on. Some of the medics who stayed remained with the city of Pittsburgh through their careers. One by the name of John Moon retired as the assistant chief, but before he left, he hired a woman by the name of Amara Gilchrist, who would go on to become the first female chief of Pittsburgh EMS and the first black chief of Pittsburgh EMS.
The thing that is just incredulous, they have the experience, they have the knowledge, they have the success, and you were so spiteful, you were so racist that you would rather hire people to run a program who have no idea what they're doing, who are all white, because you do not want to use those black people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's literally there's no way to look at it in any other way. From the city's reluctance through the 1970s there's no way to justify it because it doesn't happen in any other city, large or small, through its closing. It would be one thing if you could point to Freedom House and say, well, you know, yes, they were the first, but they didn't keep up and the world has passed them by. And so this needs to be advanced. Clearly not the case because they were selected by the US president to serve as a national standard. Their physician would go on to create the exact same program in other countries. These were people who had been on an ambulance for 7 years, had been responding to calls, were incredibly well experienced, and were from the neighborhood, who knew the city. Many of the people that they brought in were not from Pittsburgh. They were from outlying areas. So they were bringing in inexperienced people who didn't know anything, who were terrified, and who needed to have their hands held. I mean, there's this incredible story of John Moon, one of the first medics. He sticks it out. He gets on with the city. He's placed as a third man on an ambulance, which is a 2-man crew by any measure. He's told, don't talk to anybody, don't touch anybody. You just carry our bag. This by 2 people with no experience, who had less training than he did. And he sits there and he's holding their bag. He's literally holding their bag until they get a critical call. They walk in on a man who is in cardiac arrest. These 2 brand new medics with no experience, who are technically now his superiors, who don't let him touch or talk to patients, turn to him in a panic and say, do something. And John in that moment realizes his power. I am well trained. I am experienced. I know what's going on. And he basically tells these guys, sit down and shut up. He gives them pointers. You do this, you do that. He runs the code. They get this person back. They get to the hospital, having saved his life. And he turns to them and he says, from now on, things are different and I'm in charge. But that shows you, the fact that he had to go through that shows you how ridiculous how ridiculous the whole thing is. I mean, there's no other way to explain why they were treated the way they were treated.
But again, it's America. It shows you exactly who America is. It shows you exactly how people feel about this, and how the work of African Americans has been grossly underappreciated in this country. Are any of these individuals still alive?
Yeah, there's about a half dozen. And when I began working on this program or this project, this story had been dormant for decades. All of this happened before I was born. I think largely they were resigned to the fact that nobody was going to know. And, over the last couple of years, people have started to pay attention. People have responded. Just last year, the mayor read a proclamation in which he publicly thanked them. The thing that they requested in 1975 that nobody had done, he did it. They were several of them were invited to Congress for the State of the Union with President Biden. They have been given honorary degrees at universities. So people are now reaching out to them. People are recognizing them. Their contribution is being recognized. The EMS community as a whole did not know this existed. If you talk to people and you said, how did this all begin? They would have said, well, in Los Angeles or in Miami and Seattle, there were all these different little programs that began. And there was this TV show called Emergency that everybody saw and loved. And it created a generation of kids who wanted to grow up to be paramedics. None of them knew this. And the EMS community, the medical community is really embracing their story. So yeah, there are some of them who are still alive, but many, who died before they had the chance to get recognition. There was one woman I spoke to who said, my husband died without his kids really knowing what he had done. And it's tragic to hear somebody say that, and all you can do is say, well, I'll do everything I can to help carry the torch for you.
Indeed. I got to ask this here. Have they gotten the recognition from Black organizations? Has the NAACP nationally ever recognized Freedom House and these brothers? Black medical organizations.
I don't know specifically about that. I know that a lot of medical organizations have recognized them, but if has that happened? Has the NAACP done something? I don't know specifically that has happened. I think there are organizations locally in Pittsburgh that Hill House Foundation being one that has recognized them, but have they gotten their due on a national level? I don't think that's yet the case.
Amazing. It's just amazing again to hear this story. These unsung heroes. Has Pittsburgh, forget what that mayor did, has the city ever corrected that error and acknowledged these? Is there a monument? Is there a statue? Is there a plaque? Anything in Pittsburgh?
So the original Freedom House building has been saved because the Hill District is a historic area, and there's a plaque there. There's a plaque at Presbyterian University Hospital, which now has a different name, but it's now UPMC. At times there have been medallions placed on the ambulances, but as new ambulances came in, the medallions weren't always placed on the new ones. The new chief of EMS, as I said, she was an acolyte of John Moon. She has done as much as she can, and she's worked tirelessly to get this story out and to get it, so that it can be recognized. You mentioned Pitt earlier. Many of the physicians who are advisors and consultants on that show know the Freedom House people. They do what they can to help them out. They bring them to conferences. They have them speak to medical students. So the medical community in Pittsburgh, the Heinz Museum has set up there's a portion now in the medical part of the Heinz Museum that talks about Freedom House. So, the city is waking up to it. But, the first time I went there, I would talk to cab drivers or people in restaurants who say like, "Oh, what are you doing in town?" And I would explain it. And I would just get back blank stares. People hadn't heard of it, which I think was quite frustrating for everyone involved. But that is changing.
Well, absolutely. It's just the fact that these young brothers stepped up to become America's first paramedics, set the standard for the rest of the nation. And the nation not recognize them and honor them, to me, is an absolute travesty. But you do with this book. I have to ask this question. I ask this of every book author. What was your wow moment? What was your wow moment as you were researching, as you were interviewing, where there's something someone said or you discovered that caused you to go, wow, this is crazy?
I mean, there are so many moments like that. There's a guy by the name of, I keep mentioning John Moon. He's believed to be the first person to intubate somebody outside of the hospital. And, he had just been trained how to do it. And he gets told by his medical director, go ahead and do this. They get it. He does it. He's terrified. Intubating someone is a very difficult thing to do. But he's able to calm his nerves. He gets him to the hospital. He arrives. When you arrive at a hospital with a cardiac arrest, it is totally chaotic. There are doctors, there are nurses, there are techs, there are people who are trying to gain insurance information. There's all kinds of, it's noise, it's hectic. There's life on the line. There's CPR that's happening. You're trying to change hands. There's the beeping, and there's the yelling of orders and medicine being given. It's very, very chaotic. So they come in, they enter into this world, which, immediately all this noise and chaos starts up. And the doctor who's standing there just points a finger across the room and goes, "What is that?" And everybody freezes. And what he's pointing at is this ET tube that is sticking out of the patient's mouth. And John's partner, George McCary, is sitting there squeezing the ventilation bag, breathing for this person. And the doctor says, "What is that?" And the room suddenly gets incredibly quiet. And John says, "That's an ET tube." And the doctor says, "Who told you to intubate him?" Or who intubated that person? And he said, "I did." And the doctor says, "And who are you?" And in this great moment, John could have been angry. He could have been cowed. He could have been anything. But in this great moment, he sort of stands up and he goes, "My name's John Moon, and I'm a Freedom House paramedic." And that is one of those mic drop moments that just you don't get a chance to do or to see very often. That was this incredible, like, you've got to be kidding me. But there's a litany of things that these guys did first that the rest of the world immediately took on to, whether it's the design of the ambulance, what's inside the ambulance, how a paramedic is trained, the use of Narcan, the fact that the president names them the national standard months before the mayor shuts them down, the fact that Israel's EMS program is designed after them. Programs all over the world are designed after them. It is incredible what these guys did in just 7 years. And they were largely a bunch of young kids, high school graduates, fathers, sons, friends, guys who didn't even realize at the time what they were doing in terms of how much they were changing the world. But they were. Every day when they showed up, they were notching a new first. And to see all the things they went through, how poorly they were treated, and the grace with which they did it, every time it blows my mind.
That is incredible. I always love the scene from the Cotton Club where this racist guy is jamming up Lawrence Fishburne, who's backstage talking to one of the dancers. And then Fishburne turns to him and says, "Who are you and what are you doing talking to me?" I always love that quote. It just, when you were describing that, that's what it reminds me. Who are you? And basically, I don't need to explain to you who I am. Here's my name. Here's who I'm with. And most importantly, I'm saving this man's life.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shooting.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Were there any, you mentioned Narcan, were there any other breakthroughs or historic things, never done before, things that they created that still is the standard today?
Oh yeah. So if you get into the back of an ambulance, the way that the stretcher is laid out, there's a seat directly behind the patient's head, and immediately to the right of the seat is a suction unit. That is so that a paramedic can manipulate and have access to the patient's airway, which is something that was important to Saffer. And so he brings that in and tests it out with the paramedics and learns, oh, okay, these guys can do this. They can intubate. They can manage an airway. That becomes natural. If you walk into any ambulance now, that's exactly the way it looks. And the way that the training went, because Saffer was a physician, he looked at it as a truncated version of medical school. And he said, what we're going to do is you're going to get all the book learning, and then I'm going to take you out into the world. You're going to go to the ER, the OR, the ICU. You're going to go to the morgue. And then you're going to ride in other ambulances just so you can get an idea of what this stuff that you've learned looks like in practice. That's done in every paramedic program around the world today. The idea of a medical director, Safra begins this program and it hits him immediately. Medicine changes every day. You need somebody involved. You need a physician there to have the guys come back in from a call and say, hey, this worked, or this did not work, or, I think this other thing might actually work if we change what we're doing and try this instead. And so you need a physician to kind of bounce those ideas around and turn those into law. Nobody was doing that until Freedom House. And so everything there's nothing that they touch from the radio dispatch on down. There's nothing that they touch that doesn't become national standard.
Absolutely unbelievable. A fascinating story. The book is American Sirens, the incredible story of the Black men who became America's first paramedics. Kevin Hazard, outstanding. And I'm sure that a lot of people will learn so much about, again, this missing and untold piece of American history, which is, of course, Black history is American history. Kevin, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Spoke an incredible conversation there with Kevin. Be sure to get his book, American Sirens. And I hope y'all appreciated the conversation with Kevin as well as Ellie Mistel. This is why we do Roland Martin Unfiltered in the Black Star Network, bringing you deep, thoughtful conversations you're not going to get anywhere else. All right, folks. Now, listen, lots going on. So do this here. We're done with the show, but don't forget, support the work that we do. Join our Bring the Funk fan club. Your dollars are critically important to the work that we do. You want to contribute via Cash App, use the Stripe QR code. You see it right here on the screen. Click the Cash App Pay button to contribute. You can also use this for credit card as well. Checks and money order. Make them payable to Roland Martin Unfiltered. Mail them to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037 7-0196. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo RM Unfiltered. Zelle Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Download the Black Star Network app, Apple phone, Android phone, Apple TV, Android TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Xbox One, Samsung Smart TV. Also, of course, be sure to get a copy of my book, White Fear, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Minds, available at bookstores nationwide. Get the audio version I read on Audible. Also, if you want to get our Roland Martin Unfiltered Black Star Network swag, go to shopblackstarnetwork.com. T-shirts, hoodies, mugs, and more. Get our Don't Blame Me, I Voted for the Black Woman shirt, as well as FAFO Project 2025. Get that shirt as well. And, of course, folks, listen, tomorrow I'm going to be in Chicago at the Black Women's Expo. I'm going to be moderating a panel at noon. So if you're in Chicago, come to McCormick Place. Look forward to a fantastic conversation, and I can't wait to return to the Windy City. And don't forget, folks, if y'all want to support our Black-owned businesses and various products, go to shopblackstarnetwork.com. Lots of different products that you can get there. Again, toilet paper, puzzles, all sorts of stuff. And again, support our Black-owned businesses, shopblackstarnetwork.com. And don't forget, download the app Fanbase if you want to also invest. Get more information at startengine.com/fanbase. Folks, that's it. I hope y'all have a fantastic show. I'll see y'all Monday right here. Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Holla!